Welcome to WEFTEC Now. I'm Travis Loop from the Water Environment Federation. I am here with Peter Grevatt, CEO of the Water Research Foundation. Peter, thanks for coming over and talking.
Great to be with you, Travis.
Absolutely. We are here to talk about one of the hottest issues facing the water sector right now, and that's PFAS and the whole family of chemicals. I want to state, first of all, you also were the head of the drinking water office at EPA. I worked with you then, so we get all this information out on the table. So we have some history with this topic, and you bring a lot of great knowledge to bear. You were part of a session today focused on PFAS. What was your presentation and talk about?
Right, so this session was focused on knowledge development on PFAS, which is really actually quite appropriate because given all the conversation that's happening on Capitol Hill and in state houses all across the country about PFAS and steps that might be taken to be dealt with this issue, there's actually not that much known about this very complicated family of chemicals.
And not known in, I know, the health effects is part of that. What are the other knowledge gaps, if you will?
So, the PFAS family covers thousands of chemicals.
And that's something a lot of people don't realize.
That's right,
yeah.
And a couple of them are really well known and heard about, PFOA and PFOS, but those are really just examples of a much broader family. And the structures of the compounds differ quite a bit, and the chemical properties can differ quite a bit. And so trying to make decisions on a large family of chemicals when we really only know some about just a couple of that family or a few, it really makes it quite challenging.
What would be the areas of knowledge then that the water sector and really the country would benefit from shining a light on and learning more about?
Right. So PFAS are really part of a broader set of compounds that we refer to at the Water Research Foundation as constituents of emerging concern. And the thing that's important to note about that term, constituents of emerging concern, is that in the case of PFAS, it's really the concern that's emerging rather than the constituents. So PFAS, they were first manufactured over a decade before I was born, probably longer than before you were born.
Sure.
And they were first approved by FDA for food packaging when I was in grade school.
Wow.
And I can remember a product like Scotchcard, which came in a spray can that you could use to spray to waterproof fabric. Well, of course, that included a lot of PFAS. PFAS in the lining of popcorn bags. PFAS used in Gore-Tex, PFAS used in so many different applications. Perhaps the one that's best known and most talked about today is in firefighting foams. And so when we think about the water sector, it's important to understand that PFAS are very broadly present throughout our environment, including in our homes, right? And including in our diets as a result of the use of these compounds. And so it makes it challenging to start to put this in context for the water sector. So while so much of the conversation is about PFAS in water, that conversation really needs to be broadened to PFAS in the environment more broadly. And the thing that I would say about that is that science needs to have a seat at the table when there are conversations about policies that might be put in place to address these compounds. And the Water Research Foundation is the organization that will deliver that science and opportunities for innovation to address challenges like PFAS.
Could you talk a little bit about the challenge facing the water sector with PFAS and, why utilities are looking at this issue, what the challenge is, what they're looking to do about it, and it's a very complex issue. But yeah,
really important question. And so I think it's important to understand that there are a number of communities that are facing serious questions around PFAS, and many of these are located nearby areas where aqueous firefighting foam, AFFF foam, was used. And so those are fire training areas, airports, certainly military bases. And in those communities, there are significant challenges that they're facing with PFAS, in some cases either in their private well water or in their public water supplies. And the population is necessarily, or not surprisingly, concerned about what this means. In particular, what does this mean for my kids, right? And so it's important to focus on this as a real issue. And water utilities both drinking water utilities and wastewater utilities are thinking a lot about this, number one, because they have such a strong commitment to public health protection and environmental protection. That's what the water sector is all about. So that's the first driver for them. But certainly states and at the federal level too, there's consideration about whether there should be new policies or even regulations put in place to address these compounds. And so it's very important for us to understand all we can about them. Much of the conversation in the past has been about levels in drinking water that would be considered safe or considered of concern. But that has broadened now to the wastewater sector in particular, a focus on PFAS and biosolids. There's already one state that's saying that they don't want to allow land application of biosolids as a result of PFAS in those biosolids. And it becomes very, very important for us to understand, all that can be known about PFAS in the wastewater treatment sector, which is actually one of the reasons why one of our top research projects this year at the Water Research Foundation is going to be looking at the fate and transport of PFAS at wastewater treatment plants so we can better understand issues that they're facing, including biosolids and implications for land application of biosolids.
Yeah, that science is just absolutely vital to informing how that PFAS moves and if and what to do about it if something needs to be done about it, and helping utilities really respond to this, because that's one of the big issues. Well, if there's this level in the water, what does that really mean? If there's this level in the effluent, what does that mean? If there's this much in the biosolids, what does that mean? And that's really what the crux of what's being they're grappling with right now.
Absolutely, and also thinking about that in the context of the other ways in which people come in contact with PFAS, which may be right in their homes.
Right.
So, and I'm not saying this at all to diminish
Sure.
the potential concern about PFAS, but really to acknowledge that we need to understand it. And it's very critical for us to be aware of potential unintended consequences of actions that we might take to try and address a potential concern.
And while that is all very challenging, equally challenging or maybe more challenging is the communication around this, right? Especially with the public and risk communication. And I know this is something that, again, at EPA, you've spent a lot of time dealing with, and so did I. Could you talk about that challenge of communicating about PFAS to the public, especially the health risk part?
Yeah, absolutely. Back when I was at EPA, you probably recall that in my last year, the administrator asked me to lead the agency's overall effort related to PFAS. And one of the things I was asked to do, I was really honored to do, was visit communities around the country that were facing concerns about PFAS, and to sit with a mom who is thinking about the health of her child and who has said to me, I've tried to do everything right for my child, and now I have PFAS in the water in our community. Is my child going to be safe? We have to acknowledge how important these issues are for us to address. Yeah. And at the same time, I think it's difficult to communicate the very, very tiny concentrations we're now talking about. You and I, for years, talked about concentrations of parts per billion with a B.
Right.
On PFAS, we're talking about parts per trillion. And I think it's very hard to conceive of what a small amount that is. And one of the things that we will experience in the water sector, I think it's fair to say from this point forward in our future, is a recurring set of questions about, well, what about this constituent that's in my water? Because our analytical techniques have become so powerful. And Travis, I think about it, thinking back towards history, when a magnifying glass was the most powerful tool we had to visualize something, right. And then here comes the microscope. And so you look under a magnifying glass and you say, well, there's nothing there. And you look under a microscope, put that same sample in the slide, and you remember from middle school, it's like, holy cow, look at all this stuff.
On there. Yeah.
So this is the same experience we can expect to have now, where today we can now measure down to the single-digit parts per trillion of PFAS. We will see a time when we can measure parts per quadrillion.
Right.
And I think, understandably, what the public cares most about is my family safe. But when you think about such tiny, tiny, tiny concentrations and think about what it takes from a treatment perspective, to remove those and also try and wrap one's head around, well, what does that really mean in terms of risk?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very important to have that context. And we understand that any mom or dad who's thinking about their family is going to want, the right answer is 0.
Sure.
I want non-detect.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in a world where non-detect really doesn't exist.
And not just with PFAS,
and
but
not with
so
PFAS, but
many
for other
chemicals.
compounds.
Sure,
and so
absolutely.
what we have to get better at in the water sector, and one of the things that the Water Research Foundation is going to be very much focused on leading, is how we talk about these issues in a way where we can be transparent with the public. The idea is not to try and convince people that their concerns are misplaced, but actually have a conversation with them that allows them to engage on these issues. And I think it will come clear, in fact, that while we can detect something, it does not necessarily mean that there's a risk that we need to be concerned about.
Yeah, and that is a challenge to communicate that concept because the reaction from a parent is just, I want nothing in there.
As
right?
you and I both know very well.
Absolutely. I live now in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we've had Gen X, part of a PFAS compound in the drinking water there. So I've had many conversations along the soccer fields and with other people at restaurants about this and trying to communicate risk.
I'm sure you have,
yeah.
and I traveled to Fayetteville to meet with impacted communities, including people who came over from Wilmington. So I appreciate in a very personal way what those challenges look like. And so, as I said, at the Water Research Foundation, our focus is going to be helping to drive the science and the innovative approaches. They're going to help to provide answers to these questions and make sure, as decisions are made, that we're considering everything we know and everything we don't, so we can appreciate the potential unintended consequences that may occur.
Well, that was my kind of last question, is if you could talk a little bit about what the Water Research Foundation has on your agenda here related to PFAS.
Absolutely, yeah, thanks for that question. So we have done quite a bit of work understanding the most effective treatment techniques for PFAS, since we know that many communities are having to take steps, even now as we speak, to address these challenges in drinking water. But as we've seen concern start to shift from drinking water to wastewater, we're also going to be very much focused on wastewater treatment plants. And so we're doing a research study we're going to be kicking off later this year that's focused on tracking how PFAS compounds move through wastewater treatment plants. Where do they partition? How much goes to biosolids? What are the implications of those issues? And as I noted, we're also going to be very much focused on how to talk about these issues with the public. This is something we have to get much better at. The wastewater and the drinking water utilities, the stormwaters and water reuse facilities have 100% commitment to public health protection and environmental protection. We just need to make sure we're positioned to carry that message and to serve the needs of our customers.
Let's get like you said, let's get the science out there at the table, and always science first is probably a very good way to go.
Absolutely.
Peter, it was great to talk to you. I appreciate the information and perspective.
Travis, the pleasure is mine.
Great. Thank you very much for watching. For more interviews, visit weftec.org/now.